Professional wrestlers typically discuss what they're going to do in the ring, and a certain amount of planning goes into putting a match together, especially if it comes with a special stipulation attached to it. While this may be the case, things can still go a little further than planned in the heat of the moment. Whether by accident or on purpose, there are plenty of examples of major matches that, in the eyes of many, went too far and had serious repercussions for the health, careers, and reputations of the performers. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 pro wrestling matches that got way out of control. Join us. Number 10, Cactus Jack vs Terry Funk at IWA Duel of the Wilds. Cactus Jack and Terry Funk spent much of the 90s ripping each other to pieces in various hardcore matches, with their legendary final in the King of the Deathmatch tournament standing out in most fans' eyes as being their bloodiest battle. And don't get me wrong, that match, which took place in front of almost 30,000 people inside Kawasaki Baseball Stadium, was an ultra-violent spectacle. But a match they had on another, much smaller IWA Japan show some 8 months earlier was arguably even more brutal. Highlights of the bouts, fought under no ropes barbed wire scramble bunkhouse deathmatch rules, included Cactus taking a hip toss onto a flaming chair, doing the old hangman top rope spot with the barbed wire, and being struck with a fiery branding iron. Don't worry though, because Funk took more than his fair share of abuse too, and both men were looking like badly wounded soldiers by the end of the grisly 15-minute contest. Mick Foley later recalled how Tracy Smothers asked him not to do anything crazy out there right before he went through the curtain, and he and Funk proceeded to do things to each other that would be illegal in most countries. Number 9, Kurt Angle vs Shane McMahon at King of the Ring 2001. Even if you don't like him, you have to give Shane McMahon credit for going out there and taking risks that absolutely nobody would expect him to take. Whether it's going through tables, getting bashed in the head with chairs, or jumping off the highest thing he can find, Shane routinely did things in WWE matches that put his body in harm's way. At this point in his career, Kurt Angle rarely tapped into his own hardcore side, but he met McMahon every step of the way when the two clashed in a street fight at the 2001 King of the Ring pay-per-view. The match featured all the plunder you would expect with this stipulation, trash cans, kendo sticks, and so on, but things went up a level when the two men made their way to the show's stage set. It was there that Curt, who was wrestling his third match of the evening and had just broken his tailbone moments prior, was supposed to suplex Shane through a glass window. However, a production mix-up had resulted in the wrong type of glass being ordered, and Angle repeatedly attempted to do the spot, resulting in Shane suffering a concussion, not to mention numerous cuts, as his concerned father contemplated stopping the match from backstage. Number 8, Stan Hansen vs Vader at New Japan Super Fight in Tokyo Dome. Noted tough guys Stan Hansen and Vader didn't need weapons to make their matches violent, because the two men used their bodies as weapons to produce matches that were every bit as gnarly, sometimes more so, than ones featuring glass, thumbtacks, and other painful inanimate objects. Colliding in an IWGP heavyweight title match at a major Tokyo Dome show for New Japan, the Mastodon and the Lariat held absolutely nothing back, pounding each other with live rounds right from out the gates. Just a couple of minutes into the bout, Vader backed up and removed his mask to reveal what looked like an incredibly swollen eye. It wasn't just swelling though, the big man's eyeball had actually fallen out of the socket due to Hansen's punches, with Vader having to pop it back in there with his thumb. They continued to pound on each other for a further 10 or so minutes, with Vader requiring surgery on not just his eye but also his nose and orbital bone when all was said and done. Number 7, Nick Gage vs David Arquette at GCW LA Confidential. You really have to hand it to David Arquette, the Hollywood star who incurred the wrath of wrestling fans the world over after WCW decided to book him to win their World Heavyweight title in 2000. Arquette was a genuine fan of the business. He even donated his WCW pay to the families of Brian Pillman and Owen Hart, and it legitimately hurt him to see how he was perceived. So much so that he embarked on something of a redemption tour starting in 2018, where he visited various indie promotions. One of them was GCW, NJPW, where he met their world champion Nick Gage in a deathmatch at the company's LA Confidential pay-per-view. Arette was hoping this would be the match that would change the perception of him as a joke and get the fans to see him as a genuine tough guy willing to do whatever it takes, but he got more than he bargained for. At the end of a tetchy encounter, Arette was hit in the throat with a broken piece of light tube, cutting him open. Gage then had to perform a shoot judo throw and pin an incensed Arette before things got further out of hand. You might not be able to kill David Arquette, but you can get him to admit when he was in way over his head. Number 6, Sabu vs Terry Funk at ECW Born to be Wired. You only need to take one look at Sabu's battle-scarred body to know that the death-defying maniac would, and usually did, put himself through anything for the sake of the fans' entertainment. Terry Funk may have been in his 50s and decades into a storied career by the time he met Sabu in a no-rope barbed wire match in ECW, but he was still meaner than a rattlesnake, tougher than shoe leather, more dangerous than a hollow-eyed scorpion, middle-aged and crazy like a fox, and he had his own deathmatch reputation to uphold. A total spectacle that goes well and truly off the rails, the match offered little finesse but a whole bunch of visceral violence that had you worrying about their health and safety more and more as it went on. In a match full of insanity, it's perhaps best known for the moment where Sabu rips his bicep open on the barbs and rather than stop to receive medical attention, simply tapes the wound up and carries on as if nothing had happened on his way to beating Funk to win the ECW Heavyweight Championship. He certainly earned that one. Number 5, The Undertaker vs Mankind at King of the Ring 1998. Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker had set the bar incredibly high with the first ever Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood 1997. Less than a year later, the Dead Man and Mick Foley were booked for the sequel and both men were unsure about how they were going to live up to the original. With little storyline juice going in and Taker's working ability hampered by a foot injury, Foley opted to start the match out on top of the cage and grab the audience's attention immediately with one of the wildest bumps in wrestling history. To many, the match was already out of control the moment Mrs. Foley's baby boy sailed from the edge of the cell through the announce table below, but the Hardcore Legends night wasn't over yet. Not only did Foley unintentionally take a bump through the cell to the ring below, giving him numerous injuries, but he somehow made it through the rest of the match, which included him taking even more punishment, including bumps onto thumbtacks. It remains one of the most infamous matches in WWE, nay professional wrestling history, and some would still say that Jim Ross's call to stop the damn match should have been heeded. Number 4, Adam Page vs Swerve Strickland at AEW All Out 2024. At AEW Full Gear 2023, Adam Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland brutalized each other in a Texas death match that many heralded as an instant classic. So when the two bitter rivals met a year later in the main event of All Out 2024, they must have been thinking, how are we going to top that? Their lights-out steel cage match was, to put it mildly, a polarizing affair. A staple gun, barbed wire, a steel chair, bumps onto friggin' cinder blocks, a big wooden splinter, unprotected shots to the head. All of these were, to the common man, wince-inducing sights. But it was about to get a whole lot more squeamish still. No, the worst of it was when Paige grabbed a hypodermic needle and stuck it through Strickland's cheek prior to smashing Swerve on the head with a chair one last time before the referee gave it the old "alright lads, enough's enough" and mercifully called for the bell. Number 3, Bula McGillicati vs Bill Alfonso at ECW As Good As It Gets. While ECW fans might have expected to see blood and guts from the likes of Sabu, Terry Funk and the Sandman, they probably weren't expecting much of anything when managers Bula McGillicati and Bill Alfonso faced each other in 1997. However, Fonzie knew that he was on his way out the door due to his involvement in trying to broker secret deals for ECW talent to jump to WCW, and decided to use the match with Mrs. Tommy Dreamer as either his stage for a grand exit or a way to save his job with the promotion. Because just moments into the match, the former referee was shedding buckets of the red stuff, giving proceedings a genuine sense of drama and danger. I mean, seriously, the whistleblower was just covered in claret and yet somehow managed to get through a 7-minute scrap with the untrained Bula, which ended up being better than it had any right to be. Alfonso really did save his backside too, as Heyman didn't feel as if he could fire somebody who had just put themselves in the hospital due to their efforts on the show. Number 2, Mankind vs The Rock at Royal Rumble 1999. After Mick Foley got through Hell in a Cell with The Undertaker, Vince McMahon thanked him for doing what he had done in the match, but made it clear that he never wanted to see him do anything like that ever again. Foley never did take bumps as scary as the ones he did on that fateful night, but he wasn't done terrifying his boss or his family by testing the limits of how much punishment a human body could withstand. At the 1999 Royal Rumble pay-per-view, Mankind defended his world title against The Rock in an I Quit match. It was a spectacular, entertaining match in its own right, but the Great One went overboard on the finish. The two men had agreed that the ending would see Foley, with his hands cuffed behind his back, get bonked on the head with a few unprotected chair shots, after which a pre-recorded message would play, making it seem like he had said the two magic words. In the heat of the moment, however, The Rock turned a few unprotected chair shots into 11, much to the horror of those watching, which included his wife and two young children at ringside. Number 1, Sabu and the Sheik versus Tarzan Goto and Atsushi Onita in FMW. Ever heard the expression, play with fire, you're gonna get burned? Well, there's a similar one in wrestling that goes, surround the ring with flames and you're an idiot. Because with all due respect to Japanese deathmatch pioneers FMW, the no-ropes barbed wire tornado fire deathmatch they promoted on May 6, 1992 was a really bad idea. Essentially, not only were the ropes removed and replaced with barbed wire, but rags doused in kerosene were placed on the wire, which were then set alight. Despite doing a practice run earlier in the day, which went fine, the inherent unpredictability of fire reared its ugly head on the night as a change in the wind during the outdoor show fanned the flames more than anticipated. Within just a couple of minutes, it was apparent that things had gotten way out of control as the four wrestlers were trapped in a ring that was literally melting with them in it. Realizing the severity of the situation, the wrestlers wisely opted to bail and the match was declared a no contest. The bout got the promotion a lot of press, but it was a scene that could have been a lot worse and endangered more than just the lives of the wrestlers.